We had a great conversation with Jolee. She gave us some great tips on mass hiring and how to deal with mass volume of applications and how to hire 80 people at one time without going insane. This coming up next. I am here with Jolee, a former student of mine, but after she graduated with her HR certificate, we've collaborated on a number of projects, including this one. And so I thought this would be an excellent guest to have on and talk about recruitment and selection regarding a front end customer service rep. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
For those that don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself, sort of starting on how you got into HR and sort of what you're sort of up to now. And then again, we're going to try and avoid naming companies just to be company neutral.
Sure. Yep. A long time ago, I worked in a job where my role was to develop educational programming for kids. And then I would train those programs to staff. Eventually, from that job in the same company, I was promoted to a manager position where I managed a huge team of frontline team members. My favorite parts of being a manager were all personnel related. I loved hiring, I loved training, I loved setting expectations for people and seeing those staff grow into amazing humans. And so after I got some advice from a professional in the HR field, I decided that was a great move for me. Then I went to see Adam at, get some post-secondary education, and there we went.
Perfect. So we're going to focus on customer service front and desk people. So these are the kinds of individuals that may be working in retail or working in a um, for a company where they have to greet guests and provide information and deal with customers and clients face to face, providing them
Mm-hmm.
with information and that sort of thing. So walk me through your experience what a typical recruitment process trying to find these individuals would look like.
Yeah, so it starts with the manager identifying the need, either because they've lost some people or they're coming up to busy season. So they come to me with, I need to hire some folks. We go through the motions of making sure that that's all approved and budgeted. Um, I help them to update the job description and use that to post. Depending on how urgent the hire is, how urgently we need people, I might start contacting candidates right away as they apply, like literally a day or two after I've posted the job, start contacting the early birds. Um, I always begin screening resumes as they come in. I find it's a big job if I have to sift through like 150 resumes all one day. So I kind of do it right away. Sometimes managers or others will refer certain candidates, and so there's often names that I have to watch for as well. I flag them. My top sort of 10 or 15 or so, depending on how many I need to hire, I'll phone screen. So I do a phone screen for a couple of reasons. Typically with frontline guest services people, stuff like availability is really important in bringing someone in for an interview or knocking them out right away. And so I get those logistical things out of the way on the phone, so then I know, okay, this person can work the hours we need them to, let's bring them in for an interview. So that's just assessing the basic fit. And then if we have multiple new hires, probably about 85% of the people that I do a phone screen with will likely come in for an interview. The interview's pretty quick. We know what we're looking for. Frontline folks typically tend to be younger people, students, that kind of thing, and we kind of know what we're looking for there. And so about 30 minutes or so is the right time for an interview. Usually the hiring manager or a team lead of some sort is in the interview with me. I like to drive the interviews for consistency and rely on the hiring manager to provide specifics on their team and answer those questions that I can't answer. I try to schedule interviews all close together so that we can make decisions with the information sort of close at hand, being able to compare everybody at the same time. And also, because I find that it's crucial to get back to those candidates really quickly with a job offer so that they don't find a job somewhere else. Uh, I tend to hold veto power, which means that if I see a red flag in someone, I can say to the hiring manager, no, this person's not a good fit, even if they really like them, because my job in human resources is to make sure that they're a fit for the organization, not necessarily just a fit for what the manager is looking for at that specific moment in time. But there's a discussion after every interview. Ideally, the manager and I will agree that yes, we like this person, no, we don't. Um, then we go into reference or background checks depending on the role and what's required there. And then as quickly as I can, I get to a verbal offer on the phone, followed up by a formal offer through email.
Okay, perfect. So if most textbooks focus on uh, sort of ideal situations where you would have unlimited resources and unlimited time, and there was no time crunch to fill the position, nor was there any time requirement on the candidate, and they were willing to do everything and anything that were asked of them in order to do anything that you wanted. Is there anything that with your typical recruitment process that you would have liked to have added and just realistically or reasonably just you couldn't?
Yeah, we always need more time. So for frontline roles, typically I'm hiring en masse. So I might need like 20 or even 80 people to start, 4 weeks from now. And that's a lot of people. And so for myself and the hiring manager, just to simply get through all of those interviews, we have to sometimes sort of make concessions just based on the time frame that we're talking about. So there's times when I'd wish I'd had more time to interview more candidates to have a greater selection to get the actual best fit, or time for a second interview for higher up roles.
Okay, do you tend to just throw up the job description as a job posting, or do you do anything to try to deselect or have people excited to apply for the position?
Yeah, definitely. So I keep two versions of the job description. So there's a job description, which is very full. It includes a huge list of competencies and more responsibilities and expectations of the role. I take that and translate it into something shorter, which is what ends up being the job posting, and I finagle the wording to be a little bit more exciting and fun and attractive. Um, I want to attract the right candidates, and so I will word things specifically to what we need at that moment. So when it comes to something simple like availability, I'll put right in the job ad, I'm looking for people with evening and weekend availability. Basically saying don't apply if you can't work evenings and weekends. So I want to help people self select in or out of whether or not they're going to apply at that particular moment. It also really helps to set expectations and sort of realistically describe what the job and the environment is going to look like, which is really important. I would hate to hire someone and for them to feel like the job ad didn't match what the job actually is, because that's the worst.
Right. Um, are these positions typically entry level? And so, if so, what kind of skills are you looking for? If, in a matter of speaking, anyone can do it, just not well.
Yep. Communication is the biggest one. And so I'm looking even from their very first interaction with me. So if I reach out to them with maybe a screening email or a screener phone call, that first interaction is really key because I'm learning about their communication style in a slightly more realistic sense. Um, Interviews can be a little bit misleading for something like communication because they're already on edge. They're ready, they're prepared. I want to know, what do they communicate like when they're just acting normally. And so those first few interactions are pretty key to assess communication. I also look for people who are quite detail oriented, and also can have a little bit of fun and joke around with our customers, and create a welcoming environment. So it's very personality based. And there's reasons why I might look for someone who's a little more outgoing versus a little less outgoing, depending on what the team looks like at the time.
How would you put that in the job posting?
That's a good question. So, uh, typically it's relates to my organization's um, the way that their culture is written. And so in our job ads, we would have things about our mission, vision, purpose, what we do. And so, we work in an environment where people are coming to our site to have fun, and so that hopefully gets the message across that you need to help them have fun just by interacting with them. And so, part of its mission, some of the duties that I describe in the job ad might say something like, um, create a welcoming environment, and exciting touch point for the first moment that our guests arrive, or something to that effect. Those are the things that I would look for when we first interact.
Okay, and where would you post these job postings?
I've primarily worked in nonprofits, and something that I've sort of learned with that is, I get the best results from people who found our posting on our website. It means that they came to our website first. It means that they genuinely want to work there because something about our organization excites them. So I find the best results simply by posting on our website, but we also post on Job Shop, Indeed, and I actually hire internationally. So we use an international staffing agency called Global, to help sort of those mass peak recruitment periods.
Okay, and how do you get or I shouldn't get, you're able to get LMIAs for those kinds of entry-level positions?
No, it's a temporary work permit. So it's a
Okay,
2-year working visa, basically traveling holiday kind of thing.
okay.
I don't know
Oh,
what
under
they call it.
30, the under
Yes.
30, got it, got it, got it. Oh,
Yeah.
right, young people. It's all
Yeah.
coming together. It's all coming together. And so I'm just going to focus on the extremes of like having to hire 80 people. Are you getting those 80 people through that much traffic through your website, direct website, or do you do when you're looking at that mass email, you are putting it on Indeed, Job Shop, Kijiji, and all of those?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. We've got peak periods through the year where we need 80 people for about 4 months, and then it really reduces for the rest of the year. So, sort of at any other given point in the year, we might get enough just by posting on our website. But for the peak periods, we have to post pretty much everywhere. I will also expand to university job boards and alumni boards. Sometimes I'll reach out to different associations if it's a specialized position.
Okay. Um, so with entry-level positions, you get massive amounts of resumes. How do you go about screening out those or how do you go about screening that first wave of yes and no's?
Yeah, absolutely. So our applicant tracking system, our website recruitment software, screens for some really basic things like ability to work in Canada legally. Can you pass a security clearance, which is required for a company? Availability, the basic stuff like that. So that kind of screens the first wave for me, which is great. I can also input other screening questions that are requirements for specific positions, like salary expectations, do you have a valid driver's license, that kind of thing. So that helps to screen out for the must-haves, the requirements to even just work there. When I'm reviewing the rest of the applicants as they come in, unfortunately, our ATS software doesn't sort and rank them like some ATSs do. And so I look through every single one. I do look pretty quickly. So I'm looking for relevant experience. Have they worked in any other related customer servicey kind of position before? I find a lot of people applying who are have never had a job before, and so have they done anything that would have had some customer service skill building things to it, is what I look for. If there's required education or training, obviously I'm looking for that too. But where we're at, I'm looking for like-minded individuals. So people who are genuinely interested in the type of work that my organization does, the mission, vision, purpose, the activities that we offer, that kind of thing. So people who have a passion for similar types of things would generally be a good fit.
Okay. Do you have any kind of ranking or scoring system at any point that you either do on the resume or through the questions?
Uh, I have worked with ranking systems before, like a test, score out of 5 on an interview question. I don't. I find that my answers in the scoring typically matches whatever my gut feeling is, and so I haven't found them super useful in the past myself, particularly when it comes to these positions that are very personality based and very soft skill communication, that kind of stuff, it's hard to score, right? So I've experimented with rating scales in interviews. I generally find, my gut feeling kind of matches whatever that would look like anyway. My current organization is moving towards a fairly strict hire for fit model, which prescribes which types of answers we're looking for in key questions. I'm not totally convinced that this is the best way to go, but I'm very much an experimenter. I'll learn by doing. Let's see how this works and see if it adapts in any way to what works good for this position.
Absolutely, and that's some
Hmm.
great advice. No matter whether you agree with it or not, try it. You might be surprised. You might be right, but you might be surprised, or at least you can tweak it to
Yeah.
better adjust it to your corporate needs.
Yeah.
Is there any types of testing that you do at any point that you give um, the candidates to complete, or is it just an interview?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So I've hired for more technical roles in the past, like administrative roles, and I've administered MS Office testing, for example, because that's really difficult to tell from an interview and a resume because they could have had someone write their resume for them. Who knows? So that was pretty crucial for those positions. For frontline roles focused on customer service, I actually really like group interviews because I can input some interactive activities. I can make them interact with each other. It gives me a real sense on how they communicate in a slightly more realistic scenario, more practical than sort of the fake feeling of a one-on-one like boardroom interview, which is very unrealistic to what their job will actually be.
So when you mean group, you mean there's how many, like there's multiple candidates in the room? And
Yeah.
so how many candidates would you have in a room
I
typically?
I don't like to go more than 10, but I
Okay.
have done as high as 25. You need a lot of observers in the room. So typically I'd bring in the hiring manager, a couple of the supervisors or senior team members just to have more eyes. And so you can kind of catch all the nuances of what's going on with all of the candidates.
And what kind of activities or tests would you have in these group interviews?
Yeah, it's funny because people come to these and they aren't sure what to expect, and some come ready to play and have some fun and like not take it too seriously, and some are really weirded out by the whole experience, which is a flag in itself. But we would start off by a bit of an introduction. I would introduce all of the other people in the room, and we would talk a lot more about the role, kind of go over the job description a little bit of what to expect, here's how scheduling works, all that kind of stuff, so that they don't have so many questions going into it. I explain what we're going to do through the night, and then the rest of the portion of the time is in two sections. So the first section would be them doing group activities themselves that are designed to make them communicate, show potential leadership, show some teamwork skills, some problem solving and ingenuity stuff. So I might have them put together a giant floor puzzle, or like traditional team builder kind of cliche activities. It's basically those. And those get them talking and having some fun and laughing and showing off the personal skills that we're looking for. And then the second part of the time would be some one-on-ones. So I do take the time to say, okay, you guys are going to get busy with filling out this form with maybe some contact info or availability or whatever we need on this form. And as you're doing that, we're going to pull you out one-on-one and have some really quick one-on-one interviews and go through some of those more personal touches that we'd like to put on it as well.
So how do you go about formulating your questions and choosing what questions to ask? And do you ask all of the candidates the same questions, or do you customize it to each particular candidate?
Yeah, it's customized to the role, but beyond that, we try really hard to be consistent with our questions. And one reason is we don't want to ask, candidate a set of questions that they're able to easily answer and, shine with, and then candidate B some different questions that they struggle with, and it's unfair. So we try to be consistent. To formulate the questions, there's kind of four different things that I need to get with my questions. So the first thing would be similar for all roles at my company. So things around fit, interest, values, are they aligned with the company in general? I need to know that they're genuinely interested in working with us in this role and what it's going to do for them a little bit. The second section of questions would be more job specific. So this is generally based directly off of the job description. So key aspects of the job duties and the skills required to do that job. I might throw something in here related to the job, but something that's more negative or like a concern that we have, just to see how would you handle it if blah, blah, blah. You get a really cranky customer and they're yelling at you, or something that's maybe not so fun. Just to kind of set that expectation that, this job is not all 100% super fun and roses, but how would you deal with that?
And
Um,
so you gave us an example of one situational question. Can you give us just a tidbit of a couple of questions that you might ask?
yes, absolutely. I really, frontline roles, you tend to have a lot of turnover, and so understanding a person's integrity, honesty, that kind of stuff becomes really important to know before you bring them on board. So we actually will pull from prior situations that have happened on the team. So another good example would be, you're working with a service that we sell for a price. It's not a physical product, but like a service that is provided. And you notice that your colleague is providing that service for free to his friends, where we would normally charge everybody, right? You notice this. What do you do? And so it's an integrity question of, oh, do I approach them? Am I comfortable doing that, or do I go straight to my supervisor, or do I totally ignore it? We're looking for somebody who will address the issue and not totally ignore it. But I like those challenging experiences to really sort of see what type of a person they are. The other way that I like to sort of formulate questions in a way that I find sort of gives me the best responses is what's called a STAR question. So situation, task, action, and result. A lot of people forget to tell me about the result when they tell me a story. They're like, oh, I did this amazing project and it was great, and I did this and this and this. Did it turn out well? That's kind of the key. I want to know how it turned out. So that's how I will formulate some of my more favorite questions there. I might give some surprising scenarios or throw in a really oddball question too, just because, again, with those frontline customer servicey interaction positions, I want to know that they can improv a little bit and react to weird questions from customers. So tell me, I actually went to an interview once, a similar position, and they asked me, tell me a joke. I sat there with a deer in headlights look, but some people can roll with that really well, and those are the types of people I'm looking for.
Did you come up with a joke?
I did. It was a really bad one.
What was it? You gotta share now.
All right, all right. Squirrel walks into a bar and says, "Hey, do you have any nuts?" And the guy says, "No, this is a bar. I don't have any nuts." So he leaves and he comes back the next day, asks the same question, "Hey, do you have any nuts?" And he leaves. And then he comes back the third day, and the bartender's really frustrated by this point. And he says, "No. And if you come back in here tomorrow and ask me the same question, I'm going to nail your feet to the floor." And Squirrel comes back in the next day and he says, "Hey, do you have any nails?" And the bartender says, "No." And he says, "Do you have any nuts?" It's
Did
pretty
you get the
cheesy.
job?
No.
Awesome. So you kind of teased around this next question, but do you have a favorite go-to at every interview? Kind of throw this question in, or do you have like a favorite question that you enjoy asking?
Uh, it doesn't fit well with my current position, but I hired for a similar role in the past. Um, and actually went and actually it's a generational thing too, so this is why it doesn't work anymore. But a few years ago I used to ask a lot of my frontline candidates, uh, if you could be any Spice Girl, who would you be and why? And it's that oddball question that gets you like, oh my god, why am I being asked about this in an interview? But the point is to throw you off your feet and see how you do in a situation where you have to be a little bit adaptable, flexible, playful, improv a little bit. And I quite like that because you learn a little bit about somebody by telling me what type of Spice Girl you might be. But you also sort of start a conversation and get them laughing and get them out of that forced fake feeling.
And you've touched on this a couple of times, but through the interview process, what are some good signs of a candidate for a frontline customer role?
Yeah. So good signs right off the bat start even before the interview, obviously. So when I phone them and do a phone screen or email back and forth, that professional conversation style is really, really important. Um,
So
I look
before even the interview, you're judging them on the telephone, their
Yes.
email, how they're responding, that sort of thing.
Totally. Yep,
Okay.
for sure. I look for genuine interest. People who I can tell they've applied to like 50 different places and they don't totally know which place I'm calling from. What job was that? I can't remember. People who are excited. Oh, this company's called me for an interview because they really wanted to work there. Um, I look for a good, clean looking resume, cover letter. All those communications have to be really, really great. It speaks to their communication style. In the interview, I talk a lot about this with my hiring managers because I look for the humble brag, which is someone who clearly has the experience and the confidence to do the job, but not a giant ego. That's ideal. I like that. And definitely someone who can really actively listen. They don't take over the conversation. They don't tell excessively long stories. And they actually answer the question that I asked and not get totally off topic.
Okay. So you
Hmm.
hit a warning sign about ego. What are some other warning signs that you look for in a bad candidate,
Yeah.
or some warning signs that sort of tingle your spidey senses?
Yeah, for sure. Too casual in email communications or in the interview, like their body language, the way they're dressed, their tone. If they're way overdressed for the industry or way underdressed, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
you should match the way that you come to an interview, should match the type of company you've applied to. People who can't give specific examples when I have asked them for specific answers in an interview question. So if I start an interview question with the phrase, tell me about a time when, I am actually looking for a specific example. And people kind of ramble around it sometimes. And that's a bit of a warning sign to me. It kind of tells me that they might be making it up. Um, People who can't listen or focus on the question, or they ask too many questions almost like aggressively about things like the salary, the available shifts and hours, possibility for promotions and training. If they're a little bit too aggressive about those things and we haven't even really gotten to the possibility of an offer letter yet, that's a bit of a warning sign for me because they might not be happy with the job as it is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And having a good problem, let's say you have multiple good candidates, but you can only choose one or two or three for that role. How do you go about making that decision when all five of those candidates could do that job? They're qualified to do it, and you have to make a choice.
Totally. I actually would prefer a better fit than the exact qualifications because people can be trained to do tasks, but they can't be trained to work well with that manager. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
they have to fit really well with the job, the organization, the manager, the team. That's really important. Um, so looking at fits, rank them according to fit first, and then I would look at passion and potential, the two P's for me. This would make up for a lot of things, right? Like a lack of education or training or specific experience. If they've got passion and they've got the potential to be trained, that's huge. You can't teach someone to have potential. If you can find a candidate with that, that's always better. And are they genuinely passionate for the work and for what our job is or organization is aiming for?
So how do you figure out potential?
That's kind of a gut feeling, honestly, in the interview. Um, if they ask about training, or they actually, if they've expressed interest, if their resume shows that they've had I've gone to this course and I went and shadowed this person and I did this internship over here, it tells me that they're interested in learning, and so that's helpful. And again, asking the right questions in the interview, the candidate, if they're asking the right questions in the interview about how we conduct training, or what will my first day look like, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I'm getting a lot doing these interviews. I'm getting a lot of senior people always talking about their gut feel.
Mhm.
However, what I want to emphasize is when they're talking about gut feel, they're talking about years of experience that sometimes
Yes.
they might not be conscientious of what they're picking up. But once you said gut feel, but then you went into internship, shadowing, additional training, that sort
Yeah.
of thing. And although consciously you're not having a check mark going, oh, they have potential because they ask these questions. When you're
Yeah.
talking about gut feel, you're talking about things that you're picking up in the interview that just subconsciously or consciously you're aware that this person has the drive and the passion. So I just want to,
Yes.
I don't want to take away from the gut feel, but it comes with experience. It doesn't
You're
just,
right.
you
You're
know.
right. And it actually, in my current organization, we, like I said, we have a peak season and then, slower the rest of the year. And then again, it's peak. So I learn new things every year. That peak season will hire, and I think I've hired in the best possible way. And then we see how the season turns out. And I'm like, oh, we had this issue on the team. Maybe I can hire better for that next year. And so it's learning year after year.
So can you give an example where, due to something that happened in a season, the following season, you kind of changed gears?
Yeah, absolutely. So, very recently, so last year we had a position, a frontline sort of customer servicey position that we were hiring for that 80% of the job was outside over the winter time. And the other 20% was inside in a sort of different area. And we went and hired, we needed 80 people in this position. It was a huge mass hire. um, and through that winter time we had some leadership communication issues. But the biggest one was we had a lot of complaints about, I don't want to work outside, I always get stuck outside, I want to be doing the inside thing, do. And so there was a bit of a structure change that was done to help mitigate that. We split it into two different positions. We added the inside job to another role and sort of made them take that part on, but the outside role was left totally by itself. So now I'm looking ahead this winter. I'll be hiring for this outside position, and I'll be able to set those expectations a lot better from the job ad and the interview stage, saying, look, this is a 100% outside position. You have to be, ready to work in the outdoor conditions. And it's all about setting those expectations properly from the interview stage for sure.
So they've hired, they've accepted, they show up on the first day. What do you recommend about what a good orientation looks like?
It has varied drastically with the different organizations I've worked with. So I've kind of seen it all. Everything from HR leads your whole first 2 weeks to you're with HR for like half an hour and then you go off to the manager. So it's going to really depend on the organization. Um, so for us, we try to do a lot of stuff ahead of time, especially in our mass recruitment period. So we have a company orientation video that will send them ahead of time, and WMIS training, which is required, will send them ahead of time. Once they're on board and they do their first couple shifts, they get paid for that training time, just like a flat sort of rate for, hey, you did this training before you got hired. Excellent. So we do some stuff ahead of time to get them sort of ready-ish for their first day. The first day starts with HR, and I like that because we can consistently welcome people to the organization. That's super important. That first impression, what does my first day look like? Oh, I've got this smiley, lovely HR person. Ideally, that's, who you're meeting, hopefully. Um, so that welcome impression also comes with some paperwork that needs to get done and this, that, and the other thing. A really lovely introduction to the manager. The manager then takes over with a bit of a site tour, tour of the area they'll be working, and then they launch into training, whatever that looks like, and it's very different per role. Usually it includes some shadowing of some senior staff members, which is always nice, especially for frontline customer service position. Ongoing staff training is something I've seen at every organization I've worked with in varying levels. So anything from respectful workplace, like policy training, something like mental health in the workplace, active shooter training, all of these ongoing things that are available sometimes like quarterly, or that they can participate in and continue their orientation almost as they go.
How does a mass hire orientation differ from sort of throughout the year, one, two individuals trickle out? How do they differ?
Yeah. So it could be the difference of we have 5 people shadowing one senior staff member for
Okay.
a couple of days, or one or two. It could also be that at the beginning of that peak season, we bring in all of our brand new hires for a very special evening of 4 hours of, orientation training and whatever, off hours. So when there's no guests around, just so that you have that time to go over everything with everyone. And that may not happen at slower times in the year when you don't have 80 people to train.
Okay, so after hours when it's nice and quiet and you can
Yeah.
focus on the training. That's a good tip. Do you touched a little bit about applicant tracking systems, about using those as pre-screening question. Do you use any other kind of tools or technologies to help you recruit?
I do a lot of lists in Excel and like little spreadsheets to keep myself all organized. ATS does a lot of work for us. It is our document storage system as well. So I don't have a mountain of resumes sitting on my desk. They're all in our ATS, which is great. I can flag people, I can blacklist people, I can rank people within the ATS and move them around. So that helps me stay organized as well. Tools and
Do
technology.
you ever
That's
go
pretty
back to
much
the
it.
database and
Yes,
okay,
all the
from
time.
previous seasons?
Yeah, definitely. We make offers and send training videos and send notifications right through that system. So when someone applies through our applicant tracking system, if they're hired, all of that information that we've already collected through the interview process, their resume and their contact info and everything, moves directly into our HRIS side, the personnel management side of this technology. And so that means that everything's in there for every single contract they've ever been offered. Performance increases, what training they took, and when. It's all in there, sort of ready to grasp. And so anytime I have a question about a person, in those 80, oh yeah, like I remember she started a little bit later than everybody else, I can just look her up real quick and figure it out. So it's just every piece of information is there, and I don't have to hunt through filing cabinets or anything like that to find it.
Okay. And just as an aside, because you're hiring seasonally in peaks, how do you get rid of those 80 people once you don't need them for the season? Do they just get notice, or do they have a term that your contract will end at the end of X, or do they just get notice 2 weeks prior or a week prior that it's the end of season and they'll no longer have a job?
Yeah. Our seasons are based on the weather, like how long the winter is. And so the end of the contract can be a little bit unknown. When I'm hiring in the fall and I have absolutely no idea how long the snow is going to stick around, for example. So when I'm hiring in the fall for our peak winter season, we will have defined a probable end of season date. And so it might be March 31st. We kind of just pick a date. And everybody's contract will say you are hired from this day to this day. So it's a very concise sort of date to date term contract. There is often the ability to become casual annual employee after that. And so the expectation from an employee side of, oh, I might stay on and continue being an hourly team member, is very valid. So that when we're approaching contract season time, we have to give them notice, because otherwise they will just assume that they're going to continue to work there. And so we do provide notice whether or not their contract is ending on the date as expected, whether their contract is ending early or late, or whether they're going to be, staying on as a never-ending casual employee. We mandate no less than 1 week's notice. My preference is at least 2 weeks notice, especially if their contract is ending, earlier or later, because I don't want to risk losing people if we want to keep them longer. I don't want to risk people feeling uncertain and feeling that anxiety that comes with, oh, I don't know what's going on. So we try to mitigate that as much as possible by giving notice when we can.
And
It comes with the risk of
right.
losing people too early, but
And how do you find it? Do you find most people tend to stay at the end of till the end of their contracts, or once they get notice, they're like, I'm looking, and the first thing I get, I'm gone.
yeah, it's a weird time of year, and so we don't see a mass exodus as soon as we send them their notice letter. We get the odd person moving on here and there, but it tends to get quieter as our season winds down, and so it usually ends up being okay, that we've got enough people to sort of make it until the end of the season.
Okay. Is there any trends or developments that you're seeing in recruitment, whether it be positive or negative, that kind of you've noticed or you're keeping an eye out for?
Yeah. Um, just the sheer number of applicants that we're seeing means that we, the recruiters and hiring managers, we can be pickier. And so we might be turning down, perfectly good candidates just because there's 10 perfectly good candidates. And so we have the ability to be a bit pickier. And that's, I know it's frustrating from the candidate side. It's hard to find work, that kind of thing. The interviews are becoming more of a conversation. In the old days, it was, very formal. Here's the interview. I have my interview questions. And it's definitely morphing, particularly in the nonprofit world. I'm not sure about other industries, but into more of a conversation where it's almost like a two-way interview, where they're interviewing us to see if we are the right fit for them, and we're doing the same. So definitely getting a little bit more sort of pickier on both sides, I would say.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for spending the evening with me. As a
Yeah.
sort of the final question, is there any tips, advice that you could give future recruiters or future people that will be searching for people that you just would like to pass on some knowledge that you learned something the hard way, or look out for this or focus on this to have them not learn the same mistakes that you have?
Yeah, there's a lot. I could spend a whole night talking about that. Um, Make a really super clear job ad and start setting expectations for what the job realistically looks like and what they will be realistically doing right from the get-go, the good and the bad, because it's important for them to know if they're going to be the right fit for that and if it's the right choice for them. And it helps to self-select them in or out, like I talked about earlier. um, I have learned to take a little bit more control over this process from maybe some bigger personality hiring managers who want to do it all themselves. And the reason for that is consistency. So I've had this experience over and over and over of hiring, and I understand what a good fit for our organization looks like. And I know what the warning signs are in particular roles. And when you've got a hiring manager saying, "Oh, this one got a really good recommendation from my buddy down the road, and we're gonna just hire them," and I'm like, "No, they're gonna go through a formal interview process just like everybody else." So making sure that the process is consistent, that you have some control over it, and that you're working together with the hiring manager to make sure you're getting the best candidate for that position.
Perfect. And you just touched on references. It's not something that we've talked about in past
Yeah.
interviews, but I really need to throw that in. Um, do you do references, and then what kind of questions do you ask on those references?
Yeah. Because of our huge recruitment season for temporary seasonal staff, our policy is that we do references for anyone who's permanent or ongoing casual or in a leadership role. For anyone frontline temporary, we don't do references for simply because of the amount of people we hire. But when we do references, they're pretty basic because if people have something to tell you about the person you're asking them about, it doesn't matter what you ask them, they're going to tell you what they need to tell you. So I ask about, are there any reliability issues or like, attendance, punctuality, that kind of thing. What would you say are these person's real strong points? And I ask about weaknesses, but I don't ask about weaknesses. I usually say something like, we really believe in training and development here at my organization. Are there any areas that you think this candidate could improve? And that gets at their weaknesses without saying, this is why you shouldn't hire them. It's a little bit of a kinder way to ask, and it still gets the point across. I leave it open at the end. I said, is there anything else you would like to tell me about this person? Because chances are I haven't asked, the exact right question, but if they've got something they want to say, they'll say it then.
No, that's a great tip to end on. Again, thank you so much. And
Mm.
I really appreciated this conversation. I did learn a lot about mass hiring. So thank you very much. And again, thank you for another great project together.
Thank you. Yes, you too.
Take care. Thank you for watching the interview. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and click on notifications so you don't miss the next one.